Welcome to the FNDN Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. Andrew, great to have you on the podcast. I feel like I say this of all of my guests, but it's because I genuinely invite people on here that I have followed for some time and really respect in the space, and I think are just doing really fascinating and interesting things, but none more so than yourself. So I'd love you to just spend a minute introducing yourself for those who maybe aren't as familiar with you as I am.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate being on your program. Thanks for asking me. Great to connect this way. I'm an HR guy. I've been doing this work for 30 years, in-house, the vast majority of that at giant enterprise companies like Pepsi and GE, where I learned how to do HR, air quote, right. I had a startup experience really early in my life and career during the dot-com boom and bust. And so, took a company global and then took it out of business. And had a lot of stops along the way, really culminating with a CHRO job at what is now an S&P 500 company that I helped take public twice through a bunch of M&A and PE sponsor entries and exits. And I pulled my parachute back in 2018 when headquarters moved from California to Arizona to Dallas, Texas. And then that let me, a little bit of flexibility as all my equity vested, and got a silver parachute, and wrote a book and started consulting and advising. And now I'm doing all sorts of work, which is mostly facing other HR professionals. So really, I think of the work that I do now as growing CHROs in a number of different ways.
All right, Andrew, in this episode, we're going to focus on how to do more with less from a compensation standpoint. Now, I know I have certainly had more than my fair share of experiences where, maybe the compensation approach for, a business has been a little bit overcooked, or, people have felt like they can't understand it. And it just comes down to this real complexity that has been built into it because, hey, we think we're creating something that sort of better drives outcomes for the business. But, again, referring back to my experience and reflecting on my experience, it often comes at odds with the actual impact because the people in your organization just don't understand how it works. So talk to me, about what that impact looks like and why it's so important for heads of people.
Sure. Simple question, right? How do you do more with less? Yeah, I guess in the framework of a head of people and thinking about compensation, what's the point? What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to attract and retain. Sure, like we're well versed in that after a dozen years of the bull market, and things are a little shaky now more recently. More recently, we've been focused on not just attracting and retaining the workforce, but we're also focused on the output, the productivity, the bottom line. Is this generating revenue or product acceleration and sales ultimately? And so a lot of the shortcuts I think that people used in the past are not as reliable. Some first principles thinking around what are we really trying to accomplish? And I'd suggest that what we're really trying to accomplish is make everybody perform better. Have the top performers want to continue to be top performers, have the middle performers want to be amazing, and the folks that are not doing great either choose to leave on their own or figure out a way to contribute in a better, more meaningful way, right? So how do you incent that through a compensation and performance management process? I think the magic wand here is the concept of differentiation. Differentiation meaning the highest performers get a whole lot more than the middle performers, who get a whole lot more than the low performers, who probably get nothing. And boy, is that hard. Boy, is that so hard to do in an organization, to tell somebody you're a bottom performer. Actually, what I find it's harder to do is tell a middle performer that they're a middle performer. That seems to be harder. It seems like in today's world where everybody gets medals and awards for showing up, we want to give everybody a 4 on a 5 scale. And so what it requires, if you want everybody to perform better, is to significantly differentiate and make it clear that that differentiation is happening. And so with that comes this concept of distribution. It's got to be a reasonable distribution. It's got to be a realistic distribution. If only 2% of your people are in the bottom, is that real? Like, were those people on their way out anyway? Like, are you really being honest? Sour grapes, when somebody goes, they were terrible. And so combined, a reasonable distribution, and boy, way back in the day, I remember it at General Electric. I worked there in the 90s. We talked about the top 20%, the middle 70%, and the bottom 10%. And do those numbers have to be set in stone? Of course not. Can you call them lots of different things? Sure, make up your favorite name for them. But the idea is, like, not everybody is at the top of the class. And you really want to hang meaningful rewards on the top slice of performers and make sure everybody knows it. You don't necessarily need to share who got the top rating, but knowing that if you get this top rating, that you could get triple what somebody in the middle rating gets, that encourages somebody in the middle to want to be a top performer. And I bet you they're going to ask, what's it take? What do I need to do? And then you'll find yourself in conversations about, okay, what's the difference between a 4 and a 5? And what's the difference between a senior manager and a director? And you know what? Those are healthy conversations to have. They're hard. And ultimately, manager discretion may need to carry. Like, you may not be able to spell out in writing very, very clearly, here's the checklist of everything that you need to do to be in the top rating bucket. But those are healthy conversations that drive performance in an organization. So, long answer. I'd hang it, though, Matt, on you can do more with less through differentiation and a realistic distribution of the curve.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things there that I want to dive into. So the first one being communication, and I think how often we forget, or maybe we see comp as this kind of like thing that just runs in the background when it's his vehicle for incentivization. Like, we're rewarding people, so how do we make sure that people recognize why they're getting what they're getting, and how do we help other people recognize what they could get if they did this? How do we incentivize them towards the behaviors and the actions and the outcomes that we want to see? I see this in a bunch of different ways. One of the most common ones is managers who can't explain to the person they're handing a letter to what the number represents and why. Like, why am I getting a 4% pay increase? What is that? Is that a middling performer, or is that what we're paying our high performers in this environment? And like, that connection really has to be, you have to draw a line between what you're giving that person and the things that led to that for them. But absolutely. And I love the idea of, billboarding essentially what you're giving to those who are really going above and beyond and doing that. I always try to advocate for this kind of pre-brief and a debrief when it comes to a compensation cycle. Here's the things we're going to try and achieve. Here's the lay of the land at the moment. And again, you don't have to get into the specifics around the budget and things like that necessarily, because I know I've been through a million comp reviews where what we think we're going to achieve and what we actually achieve are very different. But on the other side of it, tell them about how close you got and tell them about the kinds of pay increases that the great performers really did get, because you're absolutely right. I think it does spur on these conversations of those who can see it, and especially in this economy where wages have slowed a little and, we're not seeing huge pay increases. I think it can be highly motivational. Another thing that I want to jump on is just that differentiation. And actually, I put this in a post up recently on LinkedIn, but Pave put out a great report around how performance is being rewarded at the moment. And I think they had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of data points. And I was a little bit underwhelmed with with where the market's kind of landing. We're seeing a lot of like 2.5% for someone who's meeting, 5% for someone who's exceeding. And again, in this economy, is that enough? Is that enough of a differentiation? And if you are being told and praised that your performance is great, is 5% really, isn't that great? And I think it just comes back to like, maybe there's not necessarily a lot of faith in the performance practices that we have, that they actually are discerning who that high performer is. So we do take this more modest kind of approach in terms of how we differentiate. So yeah, there's a lot of things there for people to consider.
It really mutes your budget if nobody gets zero. If a meaningful percentage of people, if you can be honest and say, like, things are not working great, we don't necessarily think you need to go, but you've been struggling. And if you can honestly say, that's been tough for 10-ish% of our population, that funds massively larger increases for the top of your curve. And if you're trying to give everybody a number that feels good, you're not going to get a distribution that makes sense. So yes, there are tough conversations to be had. I would say that we humans try to avoid those tough conversations, and we might build some processes to avoid them. But they're healthy, and they'll help your company do more with less.
I tend to have this conversation more around companies that are thinking about their compensation philosophy, but I love how it manifests here in the actual paid practice. But it's like, you want your comp philosophy to attract the right people and repel the wrong people, just like an employment brand, just like a lot of different things about how your company works. And I think sometimes we get stuck in, and I certainly have been in this mindset before myself, where we do try to please all people and we end up pleasing nobody. And so, if you really think about it in a purely transactional way, you obviously want more of these high performers. So why wouldn't you reward them inordinately more than you would your sort of middling or certainly your underperforming people? It makes a lot of sense that as a business and what we're trying to achieve, that we would do that. But yeah, I do want to acknowledge it is very hard in practice.
Yeah, I feel like there's an element here. I'd really like to take a bit of a longitudinal walk. So in an environment where you have massive distribution and differentiation, the high performers are going to stay, right? Because they're getting rewarded in a big way. The low performers are going to go away because they got a zero raise. They're probably going to depart on their own. And the middle performers will make a break in one direction or another. They're either going to check out and exit at some point, or they're going to reach for that next rung of performance. So that creates some movement, and movement can be scary. But you might have a workforce. If you have a professional knowledge worker environment, you probably experience a decent amount of movement anyway, and your organization would be healthier from some movement, from some ventilation. In another organization where pretty much everybody gets pretty much about the same, high performers have no incentive to work harder. And so their performance kind of drifts down over time. Like, why did I work that 80-hour week if I didn't have to? Low performers, they don't get zero, they get 2%. And the manager kind of explains it away, and they continue to hang around. And they're doing okay. And the middle performers, well, they don't like that. They don't like that they got a 3 or 4%, but everybody else did too, and that's just kind of the way it happens here. And so, like, the organization as a whole just kind of chugs along and doesn't really get any better. It actually gets a little bit worse over time. Like, if everybody gets about the same, there's this free rider syndrome, and there's this decay over time. So yes, it's disruptive to have some movement, but otherwise you get decay. And I think there's this false choice of disruption versus no disruption. And we would be a lot more honest if we acknowledged that if everybody gets about the same, we all get a little bit worse every round.
What are some ways that companies that maybe aren't in a position to be as differentiated when it comes to cash can kind of still try to tackle this topic. So still try to create real upside for those higher performers. But maybe they don't have they're just purely hamstrung on budget. What are some of the ways you've seen that's kind of be effectively navigated?
I feel like talking about budget and constraints is the same thing as talking about time and constraints. Like, time is a choice. Budget is a choice. We are choosing to spend our time doing certain things. We're choosing to spend our budget on more middle performers or fewer higher performers, or some mix of technology that enables our work. So, budget can and should be flexible. And so, I was at HR Transform this year again. And Jeff Diana, I think, talked about this on stage. I'll credit him anyway. Like, he's just brilliant. And he was talking about, oh shoot, Matt, I'm drawing a blank on it now. You're going to have to edit me. Here we go. When an HR person comes hat in hand with an ask, hey, can I have a 3% merit budget this year? That's disconnected. The answer is usually, okay, well, what did you get last year? We'll give you, about the same or a little bit less. But if you come with an objective that you are achieving that is in close alignment with what the company is trying to accomplish, then you're a heck of a lot more likely to get it. Like, you could come with, hey, I would like to increase sales 50% this year and ship our 3 new products early. Well, yeah, let's say yes to that. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by hiring a few more engineers, and these are going to be senior engineers that are going to move faster. And the sales force, we're converting from an inside Salesforce team to more of a outside hunter team, and we're looking for experienced industry professionals that are going to be at a higher rate. And so, like, that's a different conversation. What are we trying to achieve, and what's it going to take to get there is a conversation that should be had, that's bigger. Like, the budget conversation should be bigger than your department. The budget conversation should be the company as a whole. And that should relate to bonus and workforce planning and staffing and merit budget and all of that. So if you're just kind of on autopilot asking for the whatever World of Work or SHRM or PAVE says is the standard merit budget, chances are you're missing out. Chances are you're decaying slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this comes back to a concept that I've probably mentioned a bajillion times precisely on this podcast around being market informed rather than market led. But it really should be that if I'm hearing you right, that your budget is a factor of what our goals are and what it is that we're trying to achieve, rather than being something that you're coming to with, off the back of a report or something like that to say, hey, here's what everyone else is doing, and we should try and do the same thing too. It's kind of not as compelling, is it, to a CFO or a CEO?
Yeah, that's right. What are we trying to accomplish? What's it going to take to do that? That relates to everything about how your org operates.
It's really about, is that the right goal, and is the way we're getting there the right way of doing it, rather than, let's just refresh our bands at 3% or whatever it is.
I don't know. A parallel might be, okay, let's just do the benefits renewal. All right, well, what do we need to take away to try to minimize the cost? A much more strategic, much more value-added conversation would be, okay, we're coming up for a benefits renewal. What's it going to take to attract and retain the very specific types of workers that we most need at our organization to meet our goals? And maybe some of those workers want and need some different things than kind of everybody, or whatever history may have been. So being intentional, being thoughtful, connecting it to your company's goals now, you'll just make better decisions.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to close on that one because I think that's a really powerful framework for heads of people, or certainly listeners, to adopt in terms of how to approach this topic. So thank you.
Love it.
Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.